This is an instruction video for installing lighting in a non-powered American Flyer SD70 built by Lionel. I'm going to make this video as short as possible, so you may want to download it and keep referring to it. It's going to be divided into two sections: what you're going to do with the chassis and then what you're going to do with the shell. I'd first like to say that this conversion is going to need some skill sets. You're going to need to know how to solder fairly well. You're going to need a soldering station or a nice pencil soldering iron. You're also going to need to know how to read schematics and have skills repairing American Flyer trains. Those that have bought the Lionel non-powered unit already found out that they don't equip it with any lighting at all. So this video will help you install lighting, and it'll function like the lighting in a powered unit. The lighting will be controlled by dip switches under the engine hood. You'll be able to manually select which lighting you want on or off. I started with a Penn Central SD70 unit number 1971 as a complete unit. I bought it with the intentions of switching to shell. Lionel does not build a Burlington Northern Santa Fe non-powered SD70. So I picked up a used Burlington Northern shell, and fortunately for me, it had the ditch lights already installed in the shell since it came from a powered unit. This was a big plus. Lionel glues in the ditch lights, so when you're removing an old powered shell, you can't get them out easily. And unfortunately, right now, Lionel is not selling the ditch lights online. They are out of stock or just marked unavailable. So if you're powering up an existing shell that you want to keep, you may have to forego ditch lights on it. I really don't see a way of getting in there without ruining the shell to install ditch lights. Okay, let's get started. We're going to start with the parts list you're going to need. These are parts that you're going to need to purchase from Lionel Parts Department. You're going to need the 4 truck screws, ring terminals with wire leads, 4 micro screws. You're going to need mini screws for the mounting of the breadboard with the dip switch, washer head screws for the cab lighting. You'll need the SD70 cab PCB board with the LED lighting. You'll need the jumper board, a pair of ditch lights. As I explained, they're not available right now. The SD70 rear lighting. You'll need a generic breadboard, some 26 gauge 7-way rainbow colored wire, a 2-pin pigtail for your power connection, rubber grommets to isolate your wires from the chassis, and a generic power supply. We'll get into that later. Alright, this is the chassis. The arrow on my chassis indicates the front of the locomotive. The white circle, I'm going to use that existing hole for the power supply, and I'll have to drill a second hole for the other hole in the power supply. Make sure you pick up a power supply that fits in the narrow cavity of the shell. Removing the 2 screws from the aluminum motor mount bracket allows you then to turn the truck sideways at a 90 degree and remove it from the chassis. Here you can also see the rubber grommet that I installed that protects the wires. Here's the rubber grommet with the part number from Lionel. You'll need 2 of them. This is the truck. The good news, it's already insulated and has power coming up to it via the 2 screws that you'll see in the next clip. You'll need 4 of these screws. They're very special, hard to find. Get them from Lionel. These are the Lionel leads. You'll need 4 of them, or you could make your own. It's just a ring terminal with wire. This image shows the location of the wiring. This truck is already done and ready for installation into the chassis. Then poke your wires up through the chassis and install the truck. Do both front and rear trucks. This is what it should look like. This is the buck converter that I used. If you shop well, you can get it for $7. Again, here's the holes that I'm going to use. I used 440 machine screws with nuts with plastic insulators holding the board above the chassis, as you see here. Okay, this image shows it wired up. Make sure you keep your left rail side and your right rail side separate. Solder them into the AC side. Through experimentation, I found out that 2.5 to 2.75 volts is about where you want to be at. When you get near 3 volts, the LEDs are a little on the bright side. This is the brass set screw that you're going to adjust your voltage. Adjust it with a multimeter. Don't do it with LEDs hooked to it. Use the multimeter and you want to achieve, like I said, 2.5 to 2.75 volts. And finally, this is our 2-pin wire lead quick disconnect for our shell. Okay, next we're on to the shell. As I said before, I'm going to use this Burlington Northern shell instead of the original shell that came with the non-powered locomotive. This is a piece of breadboard that I cut to fit in the shell. This will be done by trial and error, and you're going to drill 2 holes for mounting it inside the roof of the shell. I'm planning on doing a Union Pacific SD70 also, and this particular Burlington Northern is my prototype, and I hope to clean this up better. This is what it should look like when it's installed. It should have ample room for the hood to fit back over it. After I wired mine, I had to modify the board a little bit to notch for the wiring. I'll show you that a little later. As you can see, it fits well with the hood on. Here is the parts list for the shell that we're going to need from Lionel. We'll break down these parts as we go along. As I stated before, my shell came with ditch lights installed. Here's a close-up of that. And this is a close-up of inside the nose of the shell with the ditch light wiring. The first step we're going to do is making our switch assembly. This is the jumper board that you're going to need from Lionel. At the time I was making my first prototype, I could not find the correct pin connector for the plug. It's a JST-ZH 1.5mm 7-way plug that you're going to need. I decided to hardwire it. You will need 4 of these screws to hold in the PCB boards for the LED lights. This is the board that contains the LEDs for the number boards, the front headlight, and the interior cab lighting. Diode number 1 must be removed and a jumper wire put across the 2 terminals. This is the underside of the same board. The 2 yellow LEDs are your interior cab lights. This is the rear lighting board. This is the jumper board that I wired. I removed the 7-pin plug and wired in my rainbow cable. Oriented from the bottom like I did. Cable length for the rainbow wire is about 12 inches. In this loom you're going to have 2 grounds or 2 negative wires coming from the jumper board to the switches. You will tie them together and then tie them to the negative or black cable of your power supply plug assembly. This is your negative rail. This is your positive rail going to the dip switch. On the opposite side are your switch legs going to your jumper board. They can be in any order. Like I said earlier in the video, I'm hoping you know something about switch circuits. There will be a schematic to follow. This is the rear lighting. I was able to find the correct plug for this socket. The leads should be about 4 inches on this one. tie the negative to the negative rail, and the positive will go to one of your switch legs. So when you're done, this is what it should look like. This is the complete assembly. This is the location for the overhead lighting cab lights. This is what it should look like when it's installed properly. I left one screw out so you could see how it fits around the post. The wiring loom gets tucked behind the engineer, in between the shell and the engineer. This is the location of the jumper board. This is the jumper board installed with the wiring loom we just soldered in. I'm going to try to give you some close-ups with slow panning so you can see where everything gets installed. One screw holds in the rear lights. Two screws hold in the breadboard. Bend down your rainbow colored wire so it won't be seen from the front windows. At this point, you can start putting your shell back together. If you did it right, you'll have complete analog control over each light that you just installed. It will work well in standard transformer mode, or if you're going to run it as legacy. And the best thing, these lights are not going to flicker as the train goes around the track. You can also contact me for a PDF of the wiring schematic. Some of the parts pictures in this video are property of LTI Lionel.